And we will certainly get it back out to everyone as well. And
Right.
then also, then it'll be on the website as well and be accessible that way as well. And we're right now, we are at the early stage of the process. So the next meeting, there'll be a lot more detail, right? Right now, we're still at the conceptual stage. And I'll walk through all this, but the next meeting, and we'll be sure to provide more notice. I think this ended up being like a week. I mean, we had kind of scoped this date with you, Sophia, but
Right.
no. So yeah, no, I think it'd be good to go ahead, and then you're all aware, and if you can share that with your neighbors, and then we'll get out the notification as well.
Great, we will.
Yeah,
Great, thank you.
Yeah, thanks,
Thank you.
Sophia. This is Patrice Horstman. So, we appreciate all of you that are on here tonight, and we appreciate you basically sending this out to the other members of the HOA. We have a lot of folks here tonight. There is some good information we're going to present. Some of it, of course, is new. Some of it is information that you've probably heard, but I think it's important to get it out to the HOA so that everybody has the information. As you know, and we've been trying in various social media and other ways to let the Homeowners Association know the successful partnership we've had with the Forest Service. And, we, in unbelievable record-breaking speed, got EWPP funding for both the emergency funding that was presented to us for flood mitigation and watershed restoration, as well as the most recent funding that we were able to obtain through the Department of Agriculture in EWPP funding for projects, some on, of course, private land and some on Forest Service land. So this went by, and we all know the government works at a snail's pace, and we cannot believe that we were able to get this done in such record-breaking speed. And it just really shows not only the strength of our partnership, but it shows the commitment that the Forest Service and the federal government have had to Coconino County to help us with our forest restoration, and now to help us with our flood mitigation and also our watershed restoration. So that's the good news. You've heard it. We've been talking about it a lot. We are moving forward as usual. The county has a phenomenal team together, and we are trying to move forward as deliberately and as quickly as possible to try to get some of the sediment reduction and some of the watershed restoration projects done before the next monsoon season. But as we all know, there's a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of complexities that we need to overcome. And I'm really happy that we have a phenomenal team here this evening, probably more of us than those that are initially on. And so that's why it's going to be great to really spread this information on to the folks at Mount Elden Estates and the Homeowners Association. We really would appreciate that. And we have, of course, Lucinda Andriani, who has just overseen this from the very beginning and has done an unbelievable job, and she and her team, and she's going to talk a little about that and introduce her team here today. We'll have some time if you have questions. And this is just the first of many conversations we're going to be having as we move forward. So we want to thank you for your attendance. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for your participation, and we need to move forward together. So with that, Lucinda, I'm going to have you take it away.
All right, thank you, Supervisor. And we're excited to be at this point and be at this point as quickly as we have been able to be. It's as she stated, it's been pretty remarkable that we were able to secure both an agreement with Nrcs for EWPP funding to be utilized on private property, as well as a city parcel down just within the city limits. And then as well received completed an agreement with the Forest Service last week for them to contribute $3.5 million to watershed restoration, sediment reduction measures on forest. I mean, this is a historical accomplishment to one have been done in this time frame, and for them to step forward and be funding that work in its entirety. You know, we are just deeply grateful to Matt McGrath, who's with us here this evening, and he's going to provide a little update on their piece of this process. But Matt and his team and Laura Jo West and her deputy forester have all just really stepped forward to move this forward very quickly with support of both the regional and the federal office. And so we are in a very good position to now move forward. There are some challenges which we're going to share with you tonight and some risk in this process, but you know, nothing in life goes without risk. And I think we've got a super dedicated team with natural channel design that you're all very familiar with. Alan and Mike, and Alan will be contributing tonight. Christopher and Charlie, and I also want to introduce Greg Nelson, who has joined our Public Works Flood Control District team as a program manager to really help with a number of different facets of the projects. And Greg has been with the county for some time. He's got tremendous background in a number of different arenas and technical, some other types of technical, non-engineering, but technical capacity. There's Greg, and he comes to us. He served as the district director for Supervisor Matt Ryan most recently, and is transitioning out of that role and onto our team. So you'll see Greg. You'll get the chance to meet Greg in person when we're back to having in-person meetings. So with that, let me launch into, we're gonna take each piece. We're gonna talk about on forest first. The sediment reduction project that we've reached agreement on with the Forest Service. We're going to talk about that first. And then we're going to talk about the Nrcs Emergency Watershed Protection Program project. And so for on forest, again, this is really a historical accomplishment, and we're really excited to be moving forward with this effort. And in terms of the process here, the key element to this, and I'll let Matt speak to this specifically, but the key element to this process is securing what's called the National Environmental Policy Act, NEPA approval. And so the forest is launched into that process already. They've drafted it. They're ready to, and Matt will give you the details, but they're ready to release that. And that timeline and that process will really drive when we can begin construction of the on forest measures. And Alan will share a map that shows you where those are proposed. And I think most of you will recognize the types of measures that we're proposing for on forest are very similar of the types of things that we've talked about historically. Restoring the alluvial fans, the areas where the water slows down and spreads out, is supposed to be slowing down and spreading out. Unfortunately, many of those areas now, it's eroding and creating channels through these fans. And therefore, it's not having the opportunity to both slow down and drop out the sediment, and particularly the sediment. So Alan will walk through and show you where the fans, we want to restore a set of fans that are on forest, some on the edge of the burn area. This work is primarily on the edge of the burn area and below the burn area. And then as well, more of the types of measures really we've done in your neighborhood, the grade control to stop the erosion in the channels themselves. And so significant amount of grade control and alluvial fan work. And we're estimating that cost at about $3.5 million. And The plan and intent for that is to use Tiffany Construction that you're very familiar with. They did these same types of measures on forest out in the Schultz area. Very successful. They know how to operate on forest. They know all the rules and regulations. If we get into fire restrictions, not closure, but restrictions, they know how to manage within those confines. They understand the urgency, as you all well know, how quickly they responded within your neighborhood, and they will be performing that work. So, basically where we are now with that is with the approval last week, we have green lighted Alan and Mike Carolee to conduct now the engineering. They've had concepts, and we now need to actually engineer the measures. And then obviously those need to be reviewed by the Forest Service and approved by the Forest Service. And then we'll continue down that process, and we'll continue to update you. But with that, again, the key piece to this is the NEPA process. I want to turn it over to Matt, who can speak to that process specifically. So again, thank you, Matt. We really appreciate your partnership. I mean, I don't know, folks, if you know how instrumental Mike has been in this entire process. He's really shown leadership across the board here at many different points in this process. So thanks again, Mike. Matt, sorry.
That's okay.
Hey, Matt, sorry.
You've got a mic too. Mike will be talking soon enough.
I was looking at Mike.
Yep, no, that's okay. So thank you very much, Lucinda. And of course, thank you, Supervisor Horseman, for hosting us this evening. And we'll have a chance, I'm sure, for Alan and Mike to talk in a little bit greater detail about the proposal. But just wanted to take an opportunity to explain to you the Forest Service's role in this. As Lucinda mentioned, we processed an agreement that was signed by the county supervisors and also our regional forester over in Albuquerque last week, which I'm very proud to report moved with lightning speed, both on the county side and especially on the Forest Service side. We don't always move quite that quickly, especially with paperwork. But I think we're doing a great job of not letting any paperwork or bureaucracy interfere with the important work that needs to get done out on the ground. Lucinda mentioned the National Environmental Policy Act. And so for those of you who are not super studious about public land management, every action that the Forest Service takes or authorizes on public land needs to go through an environmental analysis. And they go through varying degrees of analysis. Right now, we have also relevant to your neighborhood, the Mount Elden Dry Lake Hills Recreation and Trail Plan, which was an environmental assessment, which is a little bit more involved of a process. We've been working on that for about a year and a half, and we're just getting ready to wrap that up here in the next month or so. But we're also have started working on this proposal, and this is a relatively straightforward proposal. We've been working with Lucinda and Christopher and Alan and Mike for months, basically. Well, even since before we started talking about this project, we've been working on other projects. So a really good relationship, and we've been working on with Alan and Mike, especially on kind of designing this project so that it is relatively straightforward from an analysis perspective, and very much appreciate Alan and Mike doing that. When I say straightforward, this kind of project, when you go out there on the ground, a year from now or 2 years from now, it'll be hard for you to even see it, or hard for you to even know it. It's there. It's there doing great work, but it won't be super obvious. That's why I say it's relatively low impact on the forest. Because of that, we are just a timeline update. We're going out for scoping, which is what we call a public comment period. That starts on Friday the 21st. You'll see press releases, social media, letters going out to relevant interested parties, and that folks have a 30-day period to comment on this project. That is something that we do for every project that we do for that Mount Elden Dry Lake Hills Trail Plan. We got a lot of comments. I think we got 400 during that scoping period. I don't know if we'll get as many for this, probably not. We have that 30-day period, and then we really start digging into the analysis. Having worked with Alan and Mike, it's relatively straightforward. Our hydrologist, we've been out on a couple of field trips with them. Also, we invited U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service representative, and they were out there with us also in December, kind of, I won't say co-designing this project, but I think sharing with Mike and Alan some of their concerns. So our plan is to have this, we have some, that 30-day comment period is required by law. We have a 60-day time frame or 45-day time frame to consult with the Fish and Wildlife Service. I don't think they'll take every single day of that because we've been working with them already. But the absolute longest this would take for us to get to approval is early May, barring any kind of crazy, unseen thing where somebody, I don't know that anybody could even comment that would really derail this. But that's our plan, is have the analysis done in early May. We'll be working with Lucinda very closely as we approach that date, so that Alan and Mike and Tiffany will know, like, this is the day that you'll be ready to go, and they'll be able to start building their plan in greater detail as we get closer to that. But that is our plan. You should look for an opportunity to comment if you so choose, starting Friday. And then, as I mentioned, we'll be looking at wrapping up the analysis in early May. And also, as I mentioned, really, we're looking every day, we're trying to shave days off of that because we know we want to do a lot of this work before monsoon season. So that's why I said I doubt that Fish and Wildlife Service will take 45 days to weigh in on this for us. So if it takes them a week less, then that's a week sooner that we'll be able to get this approved and get the work done. So with that, Lucinda, I don't know if there's anything that you think that I missed there that is relevant to folks, but that's our relatively straightforward process on this.
Great, thank you. And we'll come back and allow, we'll have questions at the end as well. But I guess, Matt may want to sign off. Is there anything else that, I guess maybe we should ask if there are any questions right now? And you should see down at the bottom, can people hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Lucinda.
I can hear you.
Sorry, it changed a view here and I wasn't sure that I got it.
We can hear you and see you, Lucinda.
I think you can, down at the bottom, it should have the option for you to be able to raise your hand if you have questions. So are there any questions for Matt? And next we'll turn to Alan, who'll talk a little bit more about the proposed measures, knowing that they're still conceptual and in nature. So it looks like that Sophia has her hand raised. Sean, have you unmuted her? Is she okay to speak?
It's just it's on
Okay.
You know what, Lucinda, I raised my hand too quickly because I wanted to know exactly what we're probably going to hear next, and that is what is the plan. So I'll sit back and listen to the plan for the Forest Service. So thank you.
You bet. And know again that we're at the conceptual stage. I think we've had quite a bit of discussion already, though, with the Forest Service about the types of measures, and be very similar. We'll turn it over to Alan here. Similar to what we did back in 2020, one of the pieces that we did, I think some of you have been up the Forest Service Road and have seen some of the work that was done there. So it's a lot of the work will be similar to that. So.
And Lucinda, I will say I dropped my email address and my cell phone number in the chat or the comments. And so those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. So either, well, maybe you won't call me tonight, but anytime you have questions about this project or anything else in the near future, feel free to give me a call about anything at any time.
Great. Thank you, Matt. And we really appreciate you joining us. I know you had a long day. If you need to sign off, that's fine too.
Great. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Folks, this is Alan, and hopefully everybody can see my screen up here.
Yeah.
I hope. Great. And this is just a schematic of the concept plan for work on the federal lands. As Lucinda mentioned, there's two different pieces to this. One is the Forest Service work with a Good Neighbor Authority, and that's for work on federal lands, which we'll talk about now. Then there's a whole nother piece with the EWP on private municipal lands. But for federal lands, this brown area here is the burn area. And Spruce Avenue Wash comes out past the climbing area, comes down into the Mount Elden Estates area right through here, leaves Mount Elden Estates and flows into the city down here. the areas that we have identified on the forest that can best work on and have the greatest effect at reducing sediment are these alluvial fan areas on the western trib, the large alluvial fan coming off the main trib, and then this very important area right here as it enters into the 40-acre parcel above Mount Elden Estates. This is where all the flows, again, split out into 3 or 4 different channels. And it's important to preserve that because they work through Mount Elden Estates in 3 or 4 different channels, coalesce through Mount Elden Estates, and then come out and then onto the forest again. And this, what we were calling the Paradise Fan, is the end of Paradise Road. And then again, these are large kind of spread out areas where the valley form allows us to spread those flows out and drop the depth of the water, slow that water down as it has to work its way around a lot of stuff. And because it drops its depth and drops its velocity, it starts to drop out sediment. And so we can use these areas that we're looking at here in blue as areas that we can store sediment for a long, long period of time as it's traveling through. And as a matter of fact, some of the modeling suggests that, as sediment comes through these areas, we might be able to stop 60 to 75% of it across the fan. That 25% keeps on going. So that we still have stuff that we need to do. We need to work on sediment supply issues as well as the forest heals. But geomorphically, these are the areas that we look at. And this is all of these areas we'd be looking at creating alluvial fan surfaces, spreading them out wide, spread the flows out wide, and making sure that we can store sediment there for a long time. Some of that will involve, this area here and these areas up in here. We have a Mount Elden Lookout Road that we have to work with, and that becomes part of the plan as well. And then down in areas like this, we have several trails and stuff that we are working around as well. But those are the project areas for the Forest Service side, for the federal lands. And that is using natural materials to build grade control and to create these alluvial fan features. Those alluvial fans, we will have to take down the few trees that are left to create those. We use all that material to create our grade control with. So that's that's the nickel tour of what you can expect to see coming up on the Forest Service side of things. Any questions on that right now? Any questions?
Anybody have any questions for Alan? And it looks like Matt's still on too. So any questions, you can raise your hand or. Sean, do you see any hands raised?
I do not know.
Okay.
Any questions in the chat?
All
Okay,
right.
great. All right. Well, thank you, Alan. Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate that. And again, I think many of you have been up the road and you saw the fan and channel work that we did up there in 2020. It'll be similar. There'll be larger areas that'll be involved. One of the things that we want to facilitate, but certainly there's an opportunity to, well, I don't think the gate's actually open yet, but you can see the restored fans. I know some of you may have been out to see the Schultz area one of the key factors I think that played into the level and the strength of the Forest Service's support for this was we took the chief and the deputy undersecretary and the others that were on that trip in November, and we took them out to actually see the recovered fans out in the Schultz area, and they look beautiful. They're beautiful open areas with native grasses and plants, and shrubs are coming in now. And the one that we looked at was constructed in 14, I believe. Yeah, it was 14. And, they're really beautiful areas, and they support wildlife. And people have really come to appreciate them out there in that area. So, we'll get you we'll try to set up an opportunity to get people out there to see, because it's pretty remarkable to think about through those fans. There were major channels of erosion, and they've really worked tremendously. And in that case, not only have they dropped out a lot of sediment, they've also reduced down the actual volume of water. Here we have, the fans are smaller. We don't know how much water reduction or the slowing of water we'll actually get. This is really sediment, but my view is that we probably will see some positive benefits from these measures. So with that, we'll move, I think, again, that the key factors or risks influencing this piece, the on-forest piece, are one, getting the NEPA completed. And that really is driven by whether anybody decides to appeal that decision or anything, because that adds a whole nother time frame to it if that were to occur. And then feedback from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. How quickly can we start construction? And we're hopeful that there'll at least be some areas on forest that we can start as soon as the approvals in early May, because we're going to need that full amount of time to get the construction completed. So, but there are restrictions typically relative to the owls, and obviously we'll work with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service to try to influence that as best we can. We certainly saw no impacts out in the Schultz area. To the raptors, actually, they end up really loving these open areas. They love to hunt those open areas. So with that, we'll move on to the NRCS EWPP project. And just as a quick overview, and then I'll turn it over to Alan again to talk about the conceptual plan here, is that in effect, there are 4 project areas that you can see highlighted here. One is the 40 acres north of Mount Elden Estates. Next is the areas within Mount Elden Estates. And then there are a couple of properties within Lockett Ranches that will also are identified, again, conceptual level for some improvements. And then there is a project area. You'll see that little project area just within the city limits. The city owns a piece of land there. It was actually dedicated as part of that subdivision back in, I believe, the 70s. And there is also through there an easement for public utilities as well. And it was platted for drainage and for public utilities. So I'm gonna kind of walk through a just high level of each of these. Primarily that the 40 acre parcel that's north of Mount Elden Estates. I think everyone's aware that Ms. Bayless owns that parcel, and we have been working with and she has people working with her. She's hired an engineering firm, and they're working with us. We've met with them. We've had some additional communication with them, and we will be setting up a meeting with them, as we will all the property owners who will be directly impacted by any pieces of the project. So as we have done every time with you, we've always met with you individually to walk through what's proposed, if the proposal is going to impact your specific property. So we've had those conversations with them. They were very, overall, very positive. They went out and saw the fan out in the Schultz area that I discussed earlier, and they were very impressed with the recovery and how beautiful it is. And as soon as we're ready to have a more detailed discussion with them, as Mike and Alan work through the engineering, first phase of the engineering, then we'll be meeting with them to have that conversation and take that process forward. So likewise, in the Mount Elden Estates area, we will do likewise, again, meeting with the individual property owners. If we're going to be on your property, and once again, as we had done before, we will need to secure a new cooperator agreement for the work that's being performed. And so we'll go through a very similar process as we did before, likewise with the parcels within Lockett Ranches as well. So then there's this fourth element that's within the city limits, and that project, it's different than the other areas. The other areas were really, again, focused on alluvial fan restoration and stabilization and channel stabilization. Again, reducing down the erosion, stabilizing the channels. Some of that will involve the road areas, and I'll come back that are impacted now by the channels. And again, trying to better manage the water through Mount Elden Estates. The project within the city limits is a set of sediment collection basins. They're not retention or detention. They're sediment collection. So the water will flow through a set of basins. And again, it's a very similar concept as a fan. As you slow water down, it will allow that sediment to drop out as it goes through those basins. And those basins will collect the sediment. There'll be a small access road created to be able to get in there and clean those out. But this is kind of the last capture point for sediment before it enters the city flood mitigation system, flood conveyances. And so this is a key part of the project, but it's part of an overall project, right? All of these areas need to be treated both on and off forest for us to accomplish this reduction of 75% of the sediment goal, which is our goal. And what we believe we can accomplish based on the sediment study, that we need all of these areas to be restored and stabilized. And so with that area within the city, there are a lot of complexities. One, the city owns that parcel. We are heading up that project because Nrcs wants to work with a single party for a common area being affected by a disaster like this. And so we agreed to take this on, and we'll be the project. We're called the cooperator or the project partner. And this project will likely require additional land rights to be secured for the sediment basins to be constructed. In addition to that, there is a component of the historic Beale Wagon Road that runs right through the middle of this project area. And as a result of that, that's been identified by the Nrcs archaeologists it's not on the historic register, but it's eligible, so you have to treat it the same. So he has identified that as that this project would impact that historic feature. As many of you may be aware, the Veal Road runs for, I think, like 2,000 miles through the Southwest into California. And there are many areas in this area, as well as other areas, where there's evidence of the trail. This isn't the only location, but this is one location. And therefore, we are working with the State Historical Preservation Office. And there is a process underway now. They've already initiated a process to, in effect, collaborate and notify parties who may have any interest in this historic feature. Traditionally, we think about this for areas that have prehistoric archaeological features within it, and then there's consultation with the tribes. And so they have reached out and they're doing that consultation, their goal, they are expediting that process, and the goal, that kind of the end of the process is that the NRCS, the State Historical Preservation Officer, the city, and the district will all have to sign a memorandum of agreement. It's called MOA, Memorandum of Agreement. And basically that will lay out, we're expecting, and this will all be dictated largely by what we call the SHPO, the State Historical Preservation Officer, but that, obviously we're hopeful we will be granted the opportunity to construct this feature, and in effect that will obliterate the trail in that area. But likely there's mitigation that we will need to do. We may need to place some signage somewhere within the community, so not necessarily at this location, but perhaps at Buffalo Park, that talks about the historic Veal Wagon Road. We likely will have to do some research on and update any further thinking about the Veal Wagon Road that may have taken place. If in fact during construction we identify any artifacts from that era, or any artifacts, prehistoric, historic, we typically have to stop construction. This would be true anywhere within the project area. It can happen in your area, it can happen on Forest. If you uncover anything of a historic or prehistoric nature, you have to stop construction, identify that, consult with the archaeologist, and then make a decision about what the next steps are. But we would certainly, identify those. They would likely be placed with a museum. And so there is important to understand there is a process that we have to go through, and we cannot start construction. And this is really key. We cannot start construction anywhere within the NRCS project areas, all 4 areas, even though we all know they're like a mile apart, right? Until we have that MOA approved by all the entities. This is a really critical factor in that process. The SHPO has been very supportive. She understands this is a public safety, and this is not being done for private development. This is being done for a public purpose. And she's been very responsive and has expedited this in every way she can. So at the same time, it's a legal process that we have to go through if we're going to exercise the use of federal funds. So we're marching down that path. We also will work with the city to march through securing the easements that are needed, easements, land rights, whatever the city decides they're going to need to support this project, because legally we have to have the authority to go onto the property. And we have to demonstrate, the district has to demonstrate to NRCS that we have that legal authority. It's the same, will be the same in terms of our legal authority to come onto your private properties. And that's why we get the cooperative agreements, and then we document that we have those. And in fact, the county attorney will document that with the NRCS, that he's reviewed those documents, that they meet the legal requirements, and that we have secured the proper land rights to be on the property to perform this work. So I don't see, the land rights piece would not hold up construction in the other areas, but the MOA could hold up construction in the other areas. She is very, right now, as opposed to trying to segment this project into segments. Right now it would. So, a lot of efforts going into supporting that process. Nrcs has been very proactive. So I'm feeling positive about it, but I think the realities of that piece of this project getting constructed before the monsoon season are very limited because of the nature of the easements and land rights process that we will have to go through likely. So, but I'm hopeful, I remain hopeful that we will resolve the MOA issue, get that all agreed to, and then we can move forward with construction on the other parcels, in both Mount Elden Estates area, Lockett, and then on the 40 acres. Assuming that obviously we have to have your cooperation, and that's going to be fundamental to all this. Is once again, to do what we need to do, we have to have your agreements in, and we have to have them within a fairly swift time frame, as you all know too, if we're going to start construction in time to be able to complete this before the monsoon season. So with that kind of gives you a feel for where we are and what some of the risks are to the project. Obviously, one of the really big risks that I haven't mentioned is the weather. And right now, the Forest Service is predicting over the next 90 days, we're going to have above normal. It's going to be more dry. We're going to be dry, right? But after that, there is some likelihood that La Nina will begin to fade away. And so there's this possibility that we could get a wet spring. And, it's always hard. Matt and all of us, we want moisture every time we can get good moisture like we get in the winter and spring. But in this case, it could really complicate construction. So but we can't control the weather. We do the best we can. We advance this as quickly as we can. We start whatever construction as soon as we can. Right now, our target is to have the MOA signed by the end of March. And so the hope is that we could start construction on certainly the Mount Elden Estates, 40 acres Lockett Ranches. Again, if we secure the cooperative agreements that we need, that we could start as early as April, again, weather permitting. So that's the overview of kind of where we are, what are the pieces of this, and what are the risks that are inherent to the project. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Alan, and he's going to give you kind of the conceptual level. Once they have done, we've been waiting for these approvals to initiate the real engineering. Once they've advanced that engineering further down the road, get to a good 30%, then they'll be out to meet with you individually, so that those property owners where we expect to be doing work and we desire to do work that we think it would be important. And they'll meet with you individually to walk through all that, as we have done every time historically. So it'll be the same process. Then we'll bring the community back together and walk through, okay, here's where we are. And we'll have more detail for everyone then as well. So Alan, take it away.
Okay. Thank you, Lucinda. Thanks. And we've already had a couple questions about, where we are, what things are here. Just to get people oriented, this is the gas pipeline running along here, bending along right here. This is the Bayless property. So, and then Agave runs through here. Primrose runs right through here like this. And this is Fallen Pine and Indian Paintbrush down in here. This is down out of Mount Elden Estates and into the Lockett Ranches area down here. So the areas that you guys see kind of outlined here are ones that we've had our eyes on as we still have work to do or haven't, done anything yet that we would like to from the beginning. The Bayless property is 40-acre parcel right here. Much of this is the same kind of work that we'd be doing on the forest. There's opportunity to build a medium-sized alluvial fan here to store sediment coming out of the West Trib. As the main channel of Spruce Avenue Wash comes onto this property, as I mentioned before, it's split into 3 different watches, all of those which are kind of eroding, getting deeper and wider, and we want to kind of stabilize those. So this area in here is much the same kind of activities as you would see up on the forest. The EWP on these other areas, the EWP funding has to focus on channel stability and protection of infrastructure from the problems in the channel. And so that's what we're looking at, is opportunities where we can protect the channel in place, that can protect the roads, protect people's houses, and utilities and those kind of infrastructure. So we've looked at some areas here where the crossings may not be adequate and they are getting outside of the channel at the crossings and trying to run down roads, causing excess erosion, sedimentation, those kind of areas. There's areas in here where we know the channel capacity is not enough. It's flowing really close to people's houses. And again, down in the Lockett Estates, Lockett Ranches portion, there are some areas down through here where we're getting to the point where channel capacity is getting so low that high flows are getting close to houses, barns, and other utility structures. Down here, as Lucinda was talking, in the city portion, this area is kind of the last piece of the puzzle, if you will. We've got watershed restoration that prevents a lot of this sediment getting into Mount Elden Estates. We think we can get that accomplished. The Bayless property here does much the same thing. Here through Mount Elden Estates and Lockett Ranches, we're trying to protect those properties and utilities. Then we have another chance to arrest sediment before it gets to Flagstaff city limits here on this Paradise Fan. But alluvial fans can't stop all the sediment. They can stop a great bit of it. But down here in Flagstaff itself, there's not a whole lot of room. And all of the conveyances are really, really kind of sensitive to getting blocked with sediment. So this is this property right here. Actually, there's 2 properties right here, the city-owned parcel and a private parcel. The city-owned parcel is our kind of last chance to kind of scrub out the last little bit of that sediment before it goes into pipes and underground stuff and cross roads down into the city proper. There's a private parcel here, and that's been highly affected by flooding in the past, gotten very close to the houses. And in combination, we have a good chance to provide really good protection to these houses that are down here while we're doing this here. As Lucinda said, there's, this one might come slow, but we always recognize that we might have to move quicker on areas that are, prone to flooding and need to have something done. So we're kind of working with all of those moving pieces right now to kind of see how we can fit them all together and make things work with the timing and the funding we have. And, you know, keep in mind, and many of you that live in Mount Elden Estates know that, you know, once we got in and start looking at things and we go, oh, here's our focus area, we tend to spread out a little bit. So if you don't see your property outlined here, that doesn't mean that we're not going to come talk to you about something that we think might need to happen as we get farther down into the design phase. So that's, you know, that's without belaboring it very much. That's where we are with our concept designs, and we're kind of working pretty diligently to see if we can get these things nailed down and have something a little bit more concrete, if you will, to present to you in the next 30 days or so. Any questions for me?
Anyone have any questions of Alan?
Cool. Well,
All right.
we'll be knocking on your doors. We'll have questions for you, I'm sure. So.
Yeah, certainly. So thanks again, Alan, and really appreciate, I mean, Alan and Mike worked through the weekend. It'll be many weekends that they'll be working through to get all of this done, so that we can be prepared to go to construction as soon as legally, you know, we talk about the feasibility factors, and that one is technical, second is legal, third is financial. I think we've got the financial between the grant from within Nrcs, as you may not be aware that the district is contributing 25% of that. So out of that $3.5 million, we're contributing 25% of that. So we've taken, you know, the financial is in good shape. We feel really confident about that. And then there's the environmental and permitting and those types of things that we have to work through. So, you know, as I mentioned, you know, I mean, I think we've been really tried to be really clear and direct with you over the years about, you know, what are the risks to these projects going forward. And, you know, fortunately to date, we've been able to manage those with your cooperation. And now as we step through this phase of work in the area, there are some additional risks that may influence this. One being the NEPA process on forest being the key one, that and the clearances. And then second, getting this memorandum of agreement with the SHPO completed with the Nrcs project. So we're dedicating a lot of time and effort to this. And so know that we're all very committed, and we'll be back again to meet with you individually, those properties that are going to be impacted. And then we'll set up another broader community meeting so that everyone's aware of what the plan is and the timeline at that stage. So any other questions or comments? And I think at that point, once Alan and Mike have had a chance to delve into the actual engineering, we'll also have a better understanding. I know, Sophia, you'd asked some questions about the roads. And I think at that point, we'll have the ability to have more of a conversation about that. But I do think it's important to understand that under EWPP, our work on roads is really restricted to those areas that are impacted by the channels. And so, you know, we have to stay within those bounds. We don't want to put any of this project at risk by not managing it within those requirements. So, but we'll be able to talk with you then in a lot more detail about what is proposed in those areas for the roads. So anybody have any questions or comments you want to share? Yeah, Sophia. Go ahead, Sophia.
No, you can't.
Okay, sorry, I was muted and didn't see the icon for just a minute. But I just wanted to, first of all, thank you very much. And Supervisor Horstman, you and your team, Christopher, Alan, everyone who's helped us out from the very beginning. I think we'd be underwater if it weren't for you. We might even be an artifact at this point. So thank you so much. And I know that you've tirelessly, I should say, pursued grants and ways to help us. So I really appreciate that, as well as all of the homeowners here. And I know that you're aware, because we did send you some questions that the board had. We just met early so that we could forward those to you, just so that you would have some of those concerns in your planning. And you've talked about some of them. I realize the road issue. I understand what you're saying. And then, of course, the 13 property owners who have the spruce wash going through their property. I know you'll be speaking with those property owners and trying to mitigate the impact. So again, I just want to thank everyone involved. Matt McGrath, I'm sure I'm leaving people out, but I know that you have worked so much overtime, weekends, evenings on our behalf, and we are very grateful and looking forward to continuing a great partnership with you all. So that's what I would love to say. And I'm sorry not more people are in attendance, but I will forward this to them. And I appreciate your taking the time to try to update us with what you have. Thank you so much.
And thank you, Sophia, and everybody that's on. We really have appreciated your patience and partnership on this. And as we move forward, I'm sure there'll be further conversations, and we appreciate all of your efforts and your time here tonight. So thank you so much. And as always, we so appreciate Lucinda and the staff at the county, and of course, Matt and Alan. It's a dynamic partnership. So we're very, very fortunate to have a great team here. And thank you all tonight.
Thank you. Thank you very
And
much.
I think, Lucinda, unless there's something further, I think we can wish everybody a great night and to be healthy and safe out there.
Yep, absolutely. And thank you. And again, in advance, thank you for working with us to advance additional mitigation in your area. So appreciate it, and have a great evening. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Night.
Good night.
Good night.